Welcome to Evolve to Succeed, the podcast that brings together entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders and experts to talk about their journeys and explore the link between personal and business success. I'm your host, Warren Munson, founder of Evolve, a coaching, training and development company focused on enabling business and personal success and creating a community of like-minded individuals. Whether that be through our peer groups, one-to-one coaching, our training and development programs for you and your teams, or through our content and events, our mission is to get the best out of each individual and inspire them to be better both in life and in business. If you want to learn more about Evolve, including our beautiful co-working space in Ashley Cross in Poole, then please go to evolvemembers.com, where you'll find great content, insights, details of all of our services, and also information on our forthcoming events. For now though, let's get on with the show. This week I'm talking to Safia Qureshi, award-winning architect, innovation designer and educator. She is also the founder of ClubZero, a company that set its sights on building the infrastructure for sustainable food and beverage consumption. It's a really interesting new business model. Safia has won a variety of awards, including top prize winner for ClubZero from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Closed Loop Partners as a Next Gen winner, and Fast Company's Best UX Design in 2019. As you can tell from these credentials, Safia is an extremely bright and driven individual with an intense curiosity for a number of sectors and subjects. Our conversation goes from the evolution of cities and transitioning from an architect to an entrepreneur, to the challenges of balancing business ownership with motherhood, and her plans for ClubZero's global expansion. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome, Safia, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Hi, Warren. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on the podcast. Really intrigued to learn a little bit more about your journey, your story, everything that's been happening in your world. But for our listeners, I suppose we should just start with explaining to our listeners a little bit about ClubZero and how the concept was developed.
Well, it's no overnight success, so that's always what I like to start with. I think as most business owners know, you've got to think the long game. So my background is I'm an architect, and for most of my early sort of chapter one, as I like to call it, I spent my time building wonderful buildings everywhere, designing them, getting them delivered, working with complex teams, really, really deepening my understanding of construction, the built environment, and placemaking. So that's my DNA, is to design for well-being at scale. I'm very much interested about cities, about how we evolve, and for me, that journey naturally then collided with, well, what do we do for forward thinking into the future, and how do we apply, or how do I apply all my learnings into answering some really big questions, such as things that hit all of us and that impact all of us. And I started to, I guess, lean into projects which I could very loosely develop in my studio. So interestingly, ClubZero started off as a project in my studio. I spun it out as its own business now, right? So it was a side project. It was not what I had thought would take up my life. And you could say it was off topic in some ways. People ask me this a lot. Well, what's an architect doing designing infrastructure? And in some ways, I think that's very, very normal. So just to tell everybody here what ClubZero is, we are a returnable packaging system. It's a reuse system. And what we wanted to do was to develop up essentially a way that enabled consumers to opt into reusable packaging and be able to return them at convenient network of drop points, or conveniently return them from home, and have a way out or a way away from single-use packaging. So we're basically eliminating single-use packaging for some major brands and corporations, and we have partnerships in place now. But this started off as, literally pen to paper sketch as a light bulb moment. And, the journey started in 2015. So that's what I want to sort of emphasize. no overnight success. It took a long time for the market to catch up with my vision, which
Yeah.
pretty early.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, crumbs. You're nearly 7 years, or at some point this year, you'll be 7 years into that journey. So
Exactly.
that, yeah, not an overnight success. And sometimes, if people look at the brands and look at what's happening, there is this perhaps anticipation that things have happened at the click of the fingers,
Yeah,
but it doesn't, does
me.
it? But so what
Yeah.
those early days?
Mm,
Obviously, I assume at the time you were working still as an architect, designing
exactly.
places.
Yep.
So what were those early days like from that moment you kind of created the idea, the thought that, this returnable packaging piece could work?
Yeah.
You know, what were the early days like for you, Safia?
They were very awkward. I mean, and I mean awkward generally because you're going through a transition. You, as an individual who had trained as an architect, it's very different to then transition to an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
These are two very different roles and mindsets. One is a service economy business where you have a client, you have a brief. Sometimes you might put the brief together. You have a budget, you
Yeah.
have a vague timeline. When do they need it by? And then the other is you've got to figure out who the client is. You've got to figure out how much it costs. You've got to figure out what the product is. You've got to figure out who might want to buy it at what price. And these are very, very different roles. And so I think the first thing is, I always knew from an early point that I wanted to create value through something of my own. That was clear.
Yeah.
And I have had family, in my family, I've had businessmen and my grandfather and my great grandfather, and so but I never directly was trained underneath them. So it's not like I
Hmm.
grew up reading the FT every morning. But I guess I knew in my mind that at some point I'd like to make that leap. So in the first early days, it was very awkward. It was very uh, all about the unknowns. It was self discovery. It was self training. It was understanding, well, what are the new skills that I need,
Hmm.
which are different, which I don't have, and then which are the skills that clearly are amazing and they're going to be my secret weapon because others won't have this at all. And so I was very self-aware. It was about asking yourself those questions and opening yourself to a period of uncertainty where it comes to financials. I was moonlighting, which is always, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, but that's how you start. I was running my studio. I was also working full time. I was doing these projects as part of the studio. This is what you do in your early 30s. You're
It
just like,
is.
well, this is the time. When am I going to do it? So it was a it was an interesting experience, and I got to be. I don't think you ever get to the other side. That takes a whole lifetime, right?
Yeah.
It's a lifetime of grafting and skilling
Yeah.
up, and I could feel as I went more and more into it, I got better and better at it, and I understood the game, which
Yeah.
is required. And I started to build my network around me, which were very inspiring people in tech. And for the listeners here, our reuse system is, when you think about reusable packaging, this isn't new. We've seen the likes of beer bottles and all of this sort of
Yeah.
different types of reusable packaging. But what I realized was there wasn't an agnostic system which was run with technology, which enabled you to provide this across brands agnostically. You had lots of
Yeah.
brands doing it for themselves, and you had no way of being able to provide it as across food and beverage. It was very like siloed into specific drink types and
Hmm.
wasn't really working. And so technology was a big part. And architecture and training as an architect exposes you to all sorts of industries, but not so heavily into tech. And
No.
so I really had to learn who that community is, and then where is the best community in the tech space, and then also understand how do you fundraise.
Yeah. These are all topics we definitely are going to cover off in our conversations, Safia. But
Yeah,
I've got so many questions. I mean, the first is an observation, I suppose, and I've been there and I've done it, is selling professional services, in contrast to developing a product and selling a product.
totally different.
Services is so much easier.
Well, one is a startup, the other is a service, right? That's the
Yeah.
the definition.
But day one of a
Yeah.
day one of a service business, you can bill a client.
Yes, you can.
Day one of a
It's
product
very,
business,
very
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Day one of a product business, there is no product, and you got to invest and develop, and you got to have so much more faith, I think,
Yeah.
to develop a product business than you have a services business.
Yes, yes, and also with us, one thing that I realized very quickly is, you're going into an environment which is technology, where they favor software businesses as well.
Mm,
So they don't really like to invest in physical things. So that's another key learning. SaaS products are much more favorable
mm,
because they don't sit on balance sheets, and you don't need capital
yeah,
expenditure. It's they feel those models are more repeatable. Even though ironically, the whole premise of Silicon Valley really came to life off the back of you chip manufacturing. So there's
mm,
Intel, and this is all hardware. These are physical things, but today it is slowly changing, but vast majority of financing, we're very much leaning towards software. So I kind of had to run into that and find again the niche financiers of that particular type,
mm.
what I'm looking for. So it's a journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And was there a time, can you remember the time where you thought, I'm in this? I mean, clearly from day one, you're in, but there's a time when I'm going to go fully in and the architectural business will drop away. I mean, that was a
Right.
leap of faith moment. When did that happen?
When we got our first amount of funding in, like I
Okay.
had said, so one thing that I was advised on very early on with some friends of mine who are in the startup space is never leave your day job
Mm,
until you can support yourself. There are a couple of reasons why. First of all, you put way too much pressure on your startup if you have no day job.
mm,
It sounds like it's counterintuitive because in your head you're thinking, but I don't have the headspace to build my startup. No, you have to carve away headspace to build a startup, to keep your day job, because what will end up happening is you will get so frustrated if the startup isn't picking up quickly in time, if it's not returning your investment in time, if the market's not moving in time, you will get frustrated, you will end that journey, and you will only revert back to what you were doing before.
mm.
So the first and most important teaching from friends who I absolutely love and cherish, who are in the startup space and tech, is make sure that you are not applying that pressure on your startup because it's very
Great
early.
advice.
Yeah,
Great advice. Yeah.
exactly. And so whenever I hear people say I've quit my job and I've started this new venture and can't wait to get stuck in my head I'm thinking I'm giving them 3 months,
Yeah.
and they will either completely drop it or they will realize I need to keep a job in tandem. I need to moonlight, and
Yeah. So
yeah,
they have to do it the other way round, don't they? And
yes,
actually, yeah, if you've got a job that pays well, stick at it.
yeah, because
And you've trained well and you've concentrated on that. Don't give it up because, like as you say, there's very few overnight successes. Is there are some, but
yeah,
there's very few of them, and the rest are a hard slog. Yeah.
and it's like jumping boats. So if you're chasing a boat, you're going to try and get as close to the boat that you're chasing to be able to jump from one to the other, right? You're not going to stop your boat, park it, say bye to everyone, and then hope you're going to catch this boat that's like speeding away.
Yeah.
But that's just not. That's a sort of more kind of visual way of describing it. Is make sure that those two things are happening. So yeah, so that's one thing that I did. I kept that going, and when we got our first financing in 2017, we won quite a prestigious award from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who are the pioneers of the circular economy. You might have heard of them.
Yeah.
They basically they awarded us with the New Plastics Economy Prize, which meant we after that we had about 100K US dollars in the bank, and we could start to develop up our first product, hire new people, and start to figure it all out. And that's when I stopped officially working for anything else, and I drew the line, and that was it.
This is it. I'm in. In. Committed. So that was 2017. And if I'm right, you started with coffee cups. Is that right? Was that your first kind of service product offering
Yeah,
was coffee cups? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We've recognized that there's certain archetypes of packaging that need to exist in reuse, and what we wanted to do was, sort of start with the one which is the highest by volume. That would be the easiest to demonstrate a reuse system around. And so we launched, and initially we were called Cup Club. We did over 500,000 orders. And then we rebranded to ClubZero and launched that in September 2021 and moved into
Okay.
food, and then announced all our partnerships subsequently as well. So yeah, so now we're over 1 million orders and etc. So that's how we recognize that, again, simplifying your product range is really important. Just doing one,
Yeah.
understanding the dynamics of what it looks like with one, and then when you're comfortable,
Scale.
starting to introduce more.
It's interesting. And so, just from my understanding, as much as how does the model work? Who owns the reusable packaging? Is that you as a business, or is that the consumer, or is that the kind of shop or the retail outlet that's using it? How does that work?
So we own our own product lines. Anything that has ClubZero on it is owned by ClubZero. We
Okay.
produce our own packaging. All the IP is ours. We design everything in house. We engineer everything in house, and we have a trusted factory and supply chain set up to manufacture. So what we did in the early stages was to create these archetypes. So we created the 12-ounce best-selling cup size and lid, and we were able to basically go into the market without having to wait for customers to say yes to investing in capex, or we just wanted to
Mm.
remove all the barriers. We just thought we needed a product line that we could introduce without anyone having to put any upfront
Yeah.
costs into it. So these product lines we own. However, the system that it's developing now will be an open system, meaning that where we have third-party packaging that can still work through our reuse system, it can be returned to our drop point network, but we don't own that packaging, but we will
Right.
service it. So it means that there's certain product lines that sit on our balance sheet, yes, inventory that we have to purchase and show depreciation for, and
Yeah.
all of those things. And the same with our drop point development, which enable the consumer to conveniently return packaging. Those are also ours. We develop those in house, and we own those.
Yeah. And what's the incentive for me, the consumer, to return the packaging if it's your asset?
Well, you register. So with
Okay.
any reuse system or any borrow system, think of e-scooters, city bikes,
Okay.
books from libraries, anything which requires you to borrow something, you have to register. So part of that registration process, you download ClubZero. You might find it, in the next quarter, you'll find ClubZero available already on other apps, so you won't even have to download our app. You will be able to use other apps and consent to ClubZero's packaging in those. Um, and through that process, we are able to take information such as your name, your email, and save your payment details on file. The service is free for you to use. We don't charge the consumer. We're B2B.
Yeah.
Um, but in the event that you don't return the packaging within 30 days, then we have a way of
Oh,
charging you for
okay.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So very unique in its kind of adaptation and its route to market. And I suppose that comes back to, do you see yourself as a B2B service business, or, you've talked about tech and the fundraising aspects, or do you see yourself as a tech business?
Oh, well, we sell B2B.
Yeah.
We look at the journey, it's B2B to C, because our product is still held by a consumer in the end. So we still have to appeal and make everything aesthetically appealing, and the brand speaks to the consumer, but we sell to um, restaurants and cafes and quick service restaurants, etc. We work with distribution or logistics companies. So we have a partnership with Just Eat, which help us distribute. They bring pipeline, they introduce us to some of their big clients, etc. So that's great. So that for us is a key component. We are a tech company in the sense that everything that we have built is proprietary to us.
Yeah.
So we don't use any tech software. I mean, that's not true. We use a lot of tech software, but
Yeah.
mostly the likes of Google and
Yeah.
payment platforms such as PayPal, who are embedded in our technology, who are able to capture and save the payment information because we don't save that on our servers. But the entire tracking system to track the packaging, because every item that exists that is reusable is provided with a unique identifier, which means we can track where it is across the whole supply chain. And so at any given point, we know where inventory is, we know how many items a consumer has, we know what volume is with hosts and restaurants. And yeah, it's a really well built system. It's
Yeah.
all technology platform that's owned by ClubZero.
Fantastic. Yeah, great description of the business model. I can understand it now. And is one of your challenges therefore, are you primarily in one city at the moment? Or, I mean, is geographical spread and reach
Yeah.
the next challenge that you face? Is
Yes.
it?
So this year, and you might have seen our crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah.
We've launched, and we've got 440 investors now in there, which is great. We're overfunded, so 130% overfunded. So definitely have a look on Cedars for Club Zero and join us. We're only halfway through the campaign, so there's still time to buy shares and own a piece of the business. And that funding is going towards us being able to expand this across London. We're very much a city by city focused expansion, so we
Yeah.
don't have regional growth. Partly because this is operational, we need to keep operations optimized within a certain sort of radius. So 2022 is mostly growth across London and getting to a target of about 14,000 orders a day, which is going to put us on a path to 1.8 million in revenues. And then 2023 onwards, we will be fundraising for that for international expansion. So it's replicating what we have here to other cities. And
Yeah.
London's a great city because it's got all the hallmarks of what you expect of global cities. So if you can do it here, you can definitely replicate it in
Yeah.
most cities. So that's our next plan. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'd like to talk about the fundraising because obviously, the initial fundraising got you into the business full time, as we've discussed and explored. And was that friends and family? Was that business angels? Where did that initial funding come from?
So this was grant funding that we received from the EMF,
Yeah.
non-dilutive. After that, we started to fundraise in 2018 from VCs, so venture capitalists, as well as angels, and within people within our network, so friends and family, mostly who are in the banking space or investment space. So we have a blend of all of those on our cap table. We have some of the best VCs in Europe, including Seed Camp, who famously invested early in the likes of Revolut and
Mhm.
TransferWise, Hopin, a whole number of other big scaling startups. So I would say it's a combination, and we raised to date before this crowdfunding campaign, we'd raised 1.2 million US dollars. And yeah, we will be looking to raise anywhere between 10 to 50 million in the next year or so. So I've kind of gotten used to this mindset of you're always fundraising. I
I was
used to
just
have
about to ask that. Yeah.
I used to have this concept where I thought you could have pauses where you'd focus on fundraise, and then be able to focus back onto the business. But I think the reality is that you are always fundraising. Literally, even after this round, I will be on to the next.
Yeah.
Um, that's just it. That's the reality.
And And speaking to a lot of other founders and entrepreneurs that are going through the fundraising, and particularly in the way in which you are with the VCs and using crowdfunding platforms, they find that can be quite a distraction from the day to day. So,
Yeah.
any hints and tips of how you've managed to build the business, focus on the concept, and still successfully fundraise?
I mean, it's just I think the less you fight it, the better. So I spent a long time being very agitated about the fact that I couldn't do, the things that I felt I wanted to be doing whilst I was fundraising. Now I've just sort of tried to divide my time and create more of a balance. I think it helps when you started to build out your team, because
Mhm.
you can really, if you've built the trust, you can really start to feel like you can move slowly away from certain parts of the business. They don't all need constant feeding. So, and as intuitively, you will know at that different stages of time based on activity, you'll know which parts of the business require more of you to lean in. So sometimes it's more on the ops, sometimes it's more on the product, just because you get to certain life cycles of your product and you realize, okay, now we're into the next tranche of product development. So you have like bursts of it. You don't necessarily need to be there managing the whole thing. You can allow your team to take over that. So the one thing that my team can't do is fundraise.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely one thing that I've I guess understood more and more has a practical implication on the company's liquidity. So what I do is block up Mondays where nobody can really take up any meeting time, and I make sure that that's just purely dedicated to finance of any sort, whether it's calls with investors, whether it's me looking at our numbers, whether it's me strategizing about how much, whether it's me even just looking at growth sales and seeing, is this a good time to go speak to investors because we've now reached the growth milestones. It's things like that that I've tried to at least
Okay.
carve out my calendar so that I don't, miss out on having dedicated time.
Yeah. So, and I suppose that's generally about discipline, isn't it? And I like that phrase. Just, it's not something that you thought you're going to have to do, but just lean into it, take it on, accept it. It's on
Yeah,
your shoulders.
yeah,
Yeah. You,
yeah.
it's the investors need to hear and see your passion and belief in the business, don't they?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you can't, like I said, you can't really, nobody else can do that piece. Other people can do marketing, other people can do product, other people
Mm.
can do ops. I still do a bit of the sales. I'm bringing in more people to focus more on the sales. Again, I will have some support on fundraising, but not in any way where I'm definitely going to be the front. I might have someone helping me on the admin side, but I'm definitely have to think of all
Yeah.
of the front end stuff. So and it has to come with the business. Liquidity is the most important thing. Otherwise, you never get what you want done. So that has to come from sales, or it has to come from investment.
Yeah. No, definitely. And would like to just explore that you obviously built a team around you.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a relief when you're able to do that as a business owner, particularly, a very, lean startup means that, you haven't got the team.
yeah.
Any thoughts and hints and tips on building a team going through that kind of startup
Oof,
phase?
it's one of the hardest things. I think fundraising and team building are genuinely the two hardest things. What I have learned is my best hires have been recommendations or people directly coming to me, so inbound, not
Hmm.
hiring through, posting job alerts and going through that process. I have done that 2 or 3 times in a really and had really bad results. So what I generally tend to look for are three key things. These are the sort of defining things of great people is they should, and they don't have to have all of these three. It's good if they have at least two. If they don't have any, you've got the wrong person. So and so that's, one of them is, do they have drive and hustle? So if they are knocking on your door saying, we really love what you're doing and really want to be a part of this, here's my CV, that's a great sign. The second is that they're really smart. So if they're also pitching to you, have you thought about this thing for your sales opportunity or growth? Like, I think this would really work for you. It's an idea. I just wanted to contact you and just say, all the best, love what you're building. So if they've
Mm.
also put that in there, that's a really good sign. And then the third is that they genuinely work very hard. So they have a great work ethic and they know how to, move things, push things. So I would say that these are my three key things that I look for. And You don't always find all three, but I find that
Mm.
usually the ones who chase me, who have chased me in the past, or who people have directly said, "Safia, you need to speak to this person," is has been a long game, long term team member who I have cherished, and the others have fallen away because they simply just responded to a job ad, and they kind of
Yeah.
they did all the things that they thought they should do, is talk about why they're interested, but they're just looking for a role, and it could be you or anywhere else. It doesn't really matter. And so that's motivation is really key. So that's what I look for. But it's hard. It's one of the hardest things, I have to admit.
So, Safia, I mean, successful startup coming out of professional life, running the kind of business on the side of a kind of coming out of running the studio kind of side of things. And it's always that challenge, isn't it? Between that kind of, people call it work life balance, but I'm sure when you're running a business, there's no such thing. But the key question for me is, what effect has running the business had on you as an individual from a personal perspective?
Yeah, I mean, very transformational in the sense that when you're first starting off, I definitely had a bit of, imposter syndrome, where you ask yourself if you're good enough, you ask yourself if you're going to win, you ask yourself, lots of really hard questions, and you judge yourself really along very unrealistic unrealistic way of thinking. So there's a lot of that to deal with and get rid of, which there are actually lots of really great exercises to do that. So the first thing is just adapting to the mindset of an entrepreneur, getting comfortable with a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, and just riding with them, because they don't leave you. It's not like you go
Yeah.
through a very certain period of time. It's actually the next worry is just around the corner. So there's a bit of shifting in terms of your comfort levels. You have to be very very much open to taking risks. Things won't be as obvious as they seem, and managing that with everybody as well. I mean, it's a very lonely journey in some ways, because you naturally I have a very very supportive other half, but I don't want to burden him with all of the ins and outs of everyday occurrences either. So you have to kind of self manage all the sort of chaos that might be going on in building a business, and things are not going right, but keep your kind of emotional well-being also balanced, and in a way where you're able to communicate, but give everybody their fair share of you. Because naturally, what happens is you end up absorbing a lot of your time into your business. You forget at some point, oh gosh, I've got to invest in all my relationships, not just
Yeah.
my relationship with my business, and that includes your family, your friends, your loved ones. And so there was a sort of a moment where I probably went into one direction and realized that, okay, I've not spoken to half my friends in like a year. um, like
That's a
totally
bit extreme, isn't
disappeared.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it happens. And even
Yeah.
till today, I sometimes, when I do catch up, we're much better now, in the sense that there's a bit more realistic conversations happening, where I say, I'm so sorry for being such a terrible friend, because I'm just not as present as I used to be. And that's simply because I just don't have the same kind of time I used to. And this is something you also have to get used to. When you do generally join the world of entrepreneurship, you find that your free time is quite finite, and you want to
Mm.
spend that with your closest, your nearest and dearest. So your very sort of extensive network of friends sort of dissipates into a very condensed, immediate cohort. That's
Mm.
surely, I mean, that's what I found as well through going through the pandemic. Naturally, did that, I think, to everybody. So there are lots of adjustments, I think, in your personal life, and then of course, if you're a female founder, you're also building a family alongside supporting and building a business. So there's that to consider. How do I balance those two? So in 2019, I had Sasha, who's now almost 3. And that was, that was an intense period for us
Mm.
because we were a first year into trading, and we had new people join the team, and I had to sort of rely on them managing things while I was gone for a while, and it didn't really work out very well, and I had to sort of be back much earlier in the process than I had wanted to, and there were lots of things that pulled me in lots of different directions. We won another award in the US, which meant that I had to go fly to the West Coast, and this is, all happens at the
Wow.
same time, and so it's really challenging if you're a woman and you're building a business that's scaling, and it's a startup. So
And if you reflect on that, because I think that is a big challenge,
yeah,
and that's an easy thing to say as a male, but I think, women that have these successful entrepreneurial careers and build great businesses, and your balance of being that and being a mum, and particularly in those early years of a child's life when particularly they're babies, and
yeah.
when you reflect on your journey, is there anybody that's listening to this thinking I'm going to be going into that place?
Mm.
Anything you'd do differently if you had your time again, or any lessons that you learned that you'd share?
Yes. So when it's your number one, you sort of, you don't know what what is appropriate and what's not, right? You're sort of you're
Yeah.
kind of getting a sense of it, and it's very hard to tell a woman what she should do. For anybody, I mean, it's very hard for a woman to tell another woman what she should
Mm,
do, how she should manage herself, in and around having children, because it's so personal, and
absolutely.
you don't want to, you don't want, you certainly don't want them to feel, especially when they're a business owner, to feel as though they have to make a choice. So
Mm,
this is what happened with me. I felt like somewhere, like I had to make a choice of sort of stepping out of the picture, and I'm an alpha. I'm very much about being in there and very, very involved. I'm a very detailed person because I am an architect naturally. So I like to understand, and I did set things up so that I could be, a little bit removed. But I struggled to remove myself, first of all.
mm,
And what I could have done differently was to be a bit more demanding of my needs. I could have been a little bit more forthcoming with saying to people, this is what I need. This is what I'd require you to do to fit my needs. And I didn't quite position my needs in that way. It was more a sort of scenario where I just thought I have to remove myself, as opposed to, no, the company
mm.
needs to adapt itself to my requirements. This is
That's a
very,
really good tip, isn't it? Because but then you don't always know what your needs are, but yeah, but
which is
I
why I started with that. Exactly. So it's
yeah.
harder, it's easier now because I'm coming into my second, my round two. And
Okay.
so, yeah, so I kind of, I've already got better answers for how I want to have things. But I would just recommend, specifically for female founders, is to speak to as many other female founders as possible to understand,
Yeah.
what could you do. I think, this is a problem that we have because I'm in many groups with other tech CEOs, and we meet once a month and we talk about, the good and the bad and the mad, as you described before. And
Yeah.
you'd be amazed that, the level of female empowerment around these topics are really not existent. So you don't have many female founders who feel that they can share their needs with their boards,
No.
with their team members, even with themselves openly. And I think that's the first step, is to normalize that and to empower yourself as a female leader to say, I'd like to take this much time off, or I'd like to be involved every day, but I'd like you to come to mine and sit on my sofa while I'm at home with, during my first 3 months, because I don't want to leave, and update me on what's been going on, or, or
Yeah.
weekly or whatever. So I think you should be in a position where if you're running a business, you should very much be able to articulate how you want to be managing it beyond your immediate capabilities and ask for that.
Brilliant. Some great thoughts and tips there. I want to, just so we round up, talk about, you've mentioned awards, once or twice during the course of this conversation. And, looking on the website, there's a number of awards you've won. And clearly that original award gave you the initial grant funding to go full in on the business. So in what way do you think awards are important to a business?
Well, it depends who's giving it. Then that's the most important thing. So you can self-apply for awards left, right, and center. So
Yeah.
they're vanity awards. There
Mm.
are certain industry awards which signal to customers or signal to brands that will validate what you're doing, that will create weight in you as a business, that will create more trust. Those are very significant awards. And typically, those awards are given by prestigious bodies. So, for example, you're awarded with an MBE, right? That's like a very
Yeah.
prestigious award. People will revere that. It's from an established sort of awardee, and so you're looking at the prestige around that, and it carries weight, and it tells somebody about your business in a really good way. So versus award that you paid £250 for, and you can stick
Yeah.
a badge on
It's
your
a sticky
website.
plaster award. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So these are two different things. So when we won the New Plastics Economy Prize, I'll give you an example. We picked up the prize at Davos. We were in a room with all of the global leaders and CEOs of the biggest FMCG and large businesses globally. We were invited to meet with UN teams. We were suddenly, from being a small startup and small idea to having people, just constantly email us to say, this is fantastic, how can you, and from all over the world. So in some ways it was great. In other ways it was a bit too early because, you're not ready for international expansion. So someone emailing you from
Yeah.
Japan is not going to be useful to you. So the industry recognition and the caliber of the award is really important. So say that's key for us. We don't put all our awards on our website. We've got a lot more, but they don't make the list.
They don't make the grade.
They don't make the grade.
So to wrap up, a really enjoyable conversation, Safia. I always end with this question because and the number of, probably this is podcast 110, 111, and I think I've had a different answer every single time. So what is your personal definition of success? What does success mean to you, Safia?
It's a very good question. And I ask this all the time. It comes up. It's actually a very contentious question because I think some people immediately assume that it's to do with money, or it's about capital. But your if you have reached your purpose, you will have instant sort of gratitude for the world around you. And so
Mm.
success is fulfilling your purpose. Now, it takes a while to understand what your purpose is because that, you could find out your purpose from a very early age, or it might be something that's revealed to you over a very long period of time. And when you achieve that purpose, you will feel successful. Now, for me, um, what's really important is that I have achieved something much, much bigger than myself, and I have left something that's going to create a legacy for others to enjoy, which has brought value to this planet and our people. That's my purpose. And so for me, the success would mean that I have left that. So it's not even, I would say it's beyond ClubZero. ClubZero is perhaps one component of it. You don't want to just get to success.
Yeah.
Then what do you do? You sell the
Yeah.
business. You're like, okay, it's a
Yeah.
lifetime journey. You have to feel successful till your grave. And so I think that's also an important thing. I think people sometimes pin success on selling a business and then they go
Mm.
into deep depression or mental health when they sell it because
Yeah.
they don't know what the next marker of success is.
Yeah.
And so I think you really got to think about it as a long game. And part of leaving that legacy is, of course, everything that comes in your personal life. Successful is all your relationships. How successful you are is how well your children are brought up and what models of society they follow. So, while you're not there, while you're not, there sort of in the room with them, what do they do? And so a lot of these things come into legacy. It comes into your work, your personal, what you give back. These are all markers of success. And I haven't for one moment talked about monetary at all in this,
No.
as you can probably see, because I think my natural instinct is people will be drawn to you if you give them something, or if you provide, and if you have that impetus to bring people on your journey. You will create that energy that will bring you value and wealth and all of that happiness along the way. But I definitely see it as a lifetime piece of work, which is centered around your purpose.
Perfect. I love that. A couple of things I would say on that. I think that sense of finding your purpose and understanding your purpose and
Yeah,
fulfilling your purpose as being a definition of success is, yeah, I really like that. That resonates with me. And I completely agree with the monetary one. I think there's time and time again you see those that have sold their business and think that's it. That's what they set out to achieve and are unhappy. And then finally, I would really agree with you. And I think I've said it time and time again. I think for me, if, do what you enjoy, do what you love, do what you're great at, give value to others in what you do and in what your business does,
yeah,
and fulfill the needs of others through your business,
yeah,
and give them the commercial kind of return that they need, money then flows.
yeah,
The wealth then flows as a consequence of running a great business and satisfying need.
yeah,
If you focus on the money doesn't usually come because you're not doing it with true value, true integrity, true purpose. And yes, I'd concur with that. And you put that lovely and succinctly. Find your purpose, follow your purpose,
yeah.
achieve your purpose, and that's success. I like that. That has resonated. That's my takeaway from
Awesome.
this
Thank you.
episode. So, Safia, you have been a great guest. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a guest on the Evolve to Succeed podcast. If people want to know a little bit more about you and the business and ClubZero, where can they go?
Yeah, you can find us at www.clubzero.co. You can definitely find us crowdfunding. So if you hear this up until the 10th or 11th of February, you can own a share in our business. So head on over to our website and it'll guide you through where to go. And I'm on every social platform there is out there. So happy to exchange any views and thoughts from the audience.
Fantastic. Thank you, Safia. Thank you for being on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My hope with every episode is that you've learned something new or heard something that challenged your way of thinking and further motivated you on your path towards becoming a more knowledgeable, informed, and inspired individual and business leader. If you enjoyed this episode, then please help us by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. We really value your feedback and would love to have you along for future episodes. And please don't forget to learn more about Evolve by going to evolvedmembers.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.